You know that assignment that's been sitting in your Canvas dashboard for 2 weeks and you care about it, you know it's important, and you've told yourself multiple times, I'm going to start this tonight, or I'm going to start this right after I grab a snack. But when you open your laptop, nothing happens. You stare, you scroll, you reorganize your desktop, you get another snack, and then you check your email. And somehow you spent 3 straight hours researching the best mechanical keyboard for productivity. So let's talk about the real reason why this keeps happening. ADHD focus depends on interest, not importance. And if you don't understand this, you will keep thinking that you're lazy when actually all you really need is a completely different system. Hi, I'm Amy. I'm a college ADHD coach and a behavior analyst, and I help students build systems that work with their brain so that they can stop living in panic and start functioning independently. And so today what we're breaking down is why you can focus on some things, but not others, why just do it has never actually worked for you, and how to create interest on purpose, and why this changes school, studying, and your entire life. Because this is not a motivation problem. It's a dopamine-driven nervous system. Most productivity advice is built on one false assumption. If it's important to you, you'll do it. That might be true for neurotypical brains, but it's definitely not true for those of us with ADHD. Because your brain is not asking, is this due next week? Is this worth 20% of my grade? And will this impact my GPA? Your brain is asking, is this interesting? Is it urgent? Is there a reward? And is it new? Is it emotionally engaging? And if the answer is no, your prefrontal cortex doesn't really want to engage. Not because you're irresponsible, not because you're lazy, and not because you don't care. There is no dopamine signal telling your brain to start. So you might get task paralysis, avoidance, the staring at the screen, the shame spiral, while still caring very deeply. And that's the part that people don't see. You care a lot. This also could look like being able to start, but only when it's driven by pure sheer anxiety, because you have this anxiety and fear of failure. And so that's the only way you can get productive and get started. That also is problematic because physiologically you're convincing yourself that you're in that flight or fight mode. And so you're choosing to fight. Our nervous systems don't deserve that. So when you're at that point and you care a whole lot, but you just can't access the starting point, that's what we're going to talk about. This is a reward system, not a willpower system, and not reward in the here's a sticker for doing a good job type of way, but a reward as in giving your nervous system and your brain what it needs. Your brain runs on a motivation reward pathway, and ADHD brains have a lower baseline of dopamine, difficulty with delayed rewards, and a really hard time activating those vague outcomes. So when someone tells you, just write the paper and you'll feel good when it's done, your brain hears, do something painful now for a reward that is emotionally and neurologically too far away to actually matter or quantify the result. But if we take that same student and we say, hey, we're just gonna work for 25 minutes with a visible timer on Zoom with another person, and when you finish, text me a screenshot, it's much easier to start immediately because we're taking away all of the pressure and we're coming up with a very clear and concise commitment. It becomes less about the kind of task and more about just the action of getting started. When we work with systems that actually take behavioral science into account and you have somebody on your team that can find supports that would work for you, we find that the same student with the same intelligence and the same assignment with just a different reward structure can work. So when a student can tell me, I can't focus unless I'm interested, my response is good, because now we know exactly what we need to do to get you started. We know exactly how to build that system for you. So for example, I will have a student that is completely overwhelmed and they'll be like, I have to write this paper and I don't even want to start on it and blah, 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 blah. And we'll talk it out and we'll like go through the assignment and I'll be like, so really what you're telling me is that we need a 3-sentence intro about this. And they'll be like, well, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so what are we talking about? And they'll talk about it. I'll be like, there's a 3-sentence intro. Go ahead and write it down. And once they write it down, then they're like, oh, this is way easier than I thought it was going to be. It's way easier to get started and I can just like walk right into it. And so when you have somebody on your team who can help you break down those things, it becomes less of these like huge overlooming task and just really easy 5-second things that you can check off and you can move through your day. So you can stop procrastinating and you can get things done that needs done. Your brain will engage when a task has at least one of these things: novelty, urgency, interest, or immediate reward. So let's break that down. Novelty means new. So a new location, a new method, a new tool, a new format. And so that's why it's much easier sometimes to become productive at a coffee shop at 9 o'clock at night. Not because you're a better person at 9 o'clock at night in that coffee shop, but because you actually change the dopamine input. Urgency, not fake pressure, but visible time pressure and actual pressure that you've designed for yourself. So things like countdown timers, live work sessions, and body doubling. Your brain might need to see some time moving. Interest. This does not mean that you love the subject, because sometimes in college, we don't love all of our subjects. But what it does mean is that it can feel like a challenge, it can feel relevant, and it can spark curiosity. It can have some emotional connection, and that can spark immediate reward. So things like checklist, progress bars, and finishing a sprint, and having external accountability can be really helpful, because no reward means no dopamine and no start. And so here's the thing. When you work with somebody who is here to support your brain in the way that it works, what we do is we figure out what works for you, and we try to make tasks more appealing to your brain. So for example, even if it's a really boring essay, we're going to connect it to the web of meaningful mattering so that you understand why it matters to do this little thing, so that you can get more dopamine about being like, I'm being a big girl today, or I am being an actually good student and just getting this done. And done is better than perfect. And it means that I am one step closer to my goal. So let's just tell the truth. College is structured in the exact opposite way that an ADHD brain actually needs. That's why the statistics are so terrible on graduation. Do you know that nationwide, only 37% of ADHD students that start college will actually graduate within 6 years? That's a terrible statistic, especially given how expensive college is. So the trick is figuring out how to make it work for your brain so that you can stay in the hunt, you can get your credits, and you can get that degree so that you can actually have the career that you want to have. So the tasks in college are long, they're vague, a lot of times they're self-paced, there's a huge delayed reward, and let's be honest, there's very low feedback in a lot of classes. I'm a college instructor. I know. I don't give as much feedback as my students would probably like or deserve, because it's just not possible. The way that classes are structured means that professors teach, you're supposed to do your role as students, and we don't have a lot of time to interact on a personal basis, especially if the class is online. So this is a neurological nightmare for an interest-based nervous system. So what happens? You don't start, you fall behind, you panic, you pull an all-nighter, you survive, you crash, and then you do it all over again. And that is not a study skills problem. That is a task design problem. And that is why planners alone don't fix ADHD. I have my own graveyard of planners. I know, I've been there. Because planners organize time, but they don't create dopamine, and they don't actually get you started to use that time well. So how do you create interest on purpose? So this is the part that changes everything. You don't wait for interest. You actually have to engineer it. So instead of working on a history paper, you create finding 3 sources in 15 minutes. It becomes a challenge and a race. You add in a body double, and then suddenly your brain cares because it knows exactly what the task is and it's accomplishable. You don't need body doubling because you're dependent. It's because another human being activates your nervous system and gives you some dopamine. So you turn it into a game. Can you beat the timer? Can you track the streak? Can you race a friend? You change the environment. A new environment equals new dopamine. You create artificial urgency. Not, this is due in 2 weeks, but I am working on this from 2 to 2:25 so that I can move on and live my life. And that's how you turn the motivation on purpose. You engineer it and you create it for yourself. And if you don't know how to do that right off, all by yourself, you might need some support. So this is where an ADHD coach can come in really handy. We can't close out this conversation without talking about another piece of it. Let's talk about the shame piece. This is the part that breaks my heart for students and for other people with ADHD. Because you've been told your whole life that you're not trying. You're wasting your potential. You just need to care more. But the truth of the matter is you do care. You care so much that every time you can't start, it feels like proof that something is actually wrong with you. But the thing is there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain just doesn't respond to importance in that manner. It responds to interest and reward. You're just made different. And that's not a character flaw. That's just a different operating system. So if you take nothing else from this video, take this. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are trying to run an interest-based brain in an importance-based system. It's almost like when people put diesel into their gasoline cars and that ends up with terrible things. Same scenario. And so the moment you stop trying to force yourself to care and start building tasks that create automatic engagement for your brain, everything will change. And if you want help building those systems, that's literally what we do inside of ADHD coaching and inside of ADHDU. So where urgency is built in, structure is built in, accountability is built in, and you don't have to do this alone. Because focus isn't something you can find. It's something that you design. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.